Welcome to the podcast. It's the magical holidays. Time for Joe watching 60 Christmas movies in 60 days. Why, you might ask? Because it sounds like a crazy task to be watching 60 Christmas movies in 60 days. It'll be struggle, no I won't lie. By the halfway point I will lose my mind, but with your support I'm gonna be fine. So let's have a blast on this Christmas time. Join me now and let's find out about today's Christmas movie. Was it good or bad? Happy or sad? Is there another dead mom and dad? Let's get to it with no delay. It's your old pal Joe and he's happy to say welcome to Joe watches 60 Christmas movies in 60 days.
How's it going, everybody? It's me, it's your old pal Joe, and welcome to episode 47 of Joe Watches 60 Christmas Movies in 60 Days. We have, I was going to say a good one for you today. No, we really just have a movie. Every day, it's just a movie for you. But before we talk about that movie, let's talk about my good friends over at Third Eye Comics. Third Eye Comics, your home for comics, graphic novels, gaming equipment, music, movies, and more. Last time I also mentioned that they have a lot of fun snacks. So you can go there and get some fun snacks, or you can visit one of their many stores in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, or of course, and as always, you can go to shop.thirdeyecomics.com to see if they have anything that you may be interested in for yourself. It's probably a little too late for Christmas by the time you're listening to this. So I don't know, why don't you treat yourself to something good? Maybe a nice comic out there that you haven't read before, or maybe there's a game that you've been wanting to play. I don't know, man, find something. Just you know what, spoil yourself a little bit. You deserve it. Let's talk about today's movie. Today's movie is Must Love Christmas. It is snowy as hell in this small town. We're at a train station and we hear a voiceover from our main character, Natalie, narrating what sounds like a romance novel that she's writing, and it is, between these characters. There's a Holly and there's a Derek. Derek proposes and Holly accepts. Cut to our main character, Natalie, finishing writing up her story. She hits print on her novel, same time next Christmas. So let's just go ahead and offer you some backstory on our main character, Natalie here. She is a novelist who focuses on and basically exclusively writes Christmas romance novels. And this is her newest one that she's now ready to turn into her editor. Cut to her editor, Gloria, reading it. Unfortunately, Gloria hates the last 30 pages, but she loves the title though. Same time next Christmas. The editor says, look, you can figure this out. You're the queen of Christmas romance. The problem is Natalie. Katie's the last movie. Natalie, you're always stuck in this apartment writing away. You know, you need to get out of there. You need to do things. You need to broaden your life so that you have, more inspiration to write about. And she says, didn't I hear that the publisher set up a special book signing for you for the 10th anniversary of your first big book? And she goes, yeah, but I don't really do book signings. She goes, I know, but maybe you should do this one. Maybe this one is worth going to. It's at the first store that ever carried your books. Are you going to go to that? And again, Natalie's like, I don't really want to go. It's not really my thing. She finds herself overwhelmed when there's lots of people around, and she's not really as perfect or as clever as they want her to be. Regardless, her editor wants her to go. Cut to a meeting of the writing staff for She magazine. This is our other main character being focused upon. The editor is unhappy with the pitches for the Christmas issue. She wants everyone to chase down a big story or else the magazine may get merged with another magazine, and some folks are going to lose their jobs. Cut to Natalie and her editor still talking about the book. The editor says, look, you've been struggling with your romance writing because you don't have any romance in your life. You need someone to fill your list. What list? The editor then explains that her mom once had her write down a list of 5 traits that she wants in a partner. Now she wants Natalie to do the same. Back to the She magazine, 2 of our journalists brainstorm about possible stories. These folks are Nick and Lucas. Nick is the traditional journalist, and Lucas is his his regular photographer. I'll put it that way. Nick finds out Lucas reads romance novels and gives him a hard time. Lucas is all, you haven't read Natalie Wolf? Well, wouldn't you know, that's our main character. And then says romance novels give them a safe place to exist in this messed up world, or give people a safe place. Nick immediately gets an idea and looks up Natalie. Back to Natalie and her buddy preparing for a trip to the book signing. It's not her buddy, it's her publicist. I just didn't know it at the time. They talk about the list concept. Natalie starts to fills her out. She starts with sense of humor, which is really not a copycat per se, but that's also what her editor had as her first list item. So now Natalie's thinking, like, why not? That's a good thing. I want somebody with a sense of humor. That'll be the first on my list. Back to She magazine, Nick tells the editor that he wants to interview Natalie Wolff. His editor says that's great because she's a very popular author, but the problem is she is a recluse. He says, yeah, I know. That's why it'll be such a good get for the magazine. Her editor is sure that Natalie won't talk to him, but he just wants a chance, so she gives it to him. You can try to chase down this story. Cut to the book signing. We see Nick is in line. The line is very long. And Natalie, when she walks up to the line, is very overwhelmed. She pulls up her hood and pops on some sunglasses so she's not recognized, and then she seems to get in her own line, which was kind of confusing. So she's right behind Nick in line as he explains to someone in line that he's a journalist and has only read one book. He can see the appeal, but it's not for him. He says it's all a bit dated, you know. The book sort of perpetuates the myth that women secretly desire to be rescued by a man. As she listens, Natalie's mouth grows wider and wider. Eventually, she's heard enough and says, I completely disagree. Everyone is shocked to see Natalie Wolff in person, in line with them. She immediately catches herself and hurries into the store. Cut to Natalie reading from her book, Bumped in Buffalo. It's the 10-year anniversary of this book, and now it's time for a Q&A. Somebody asks, do real people inspire your characters? She says yes, and then says the man in this book was inspired by her first high school crush. Next, Nick chimes in and asks if the queen of romance has found her own Mr. Right. Natalie gets a little annoyed and says happily ever after is more of a journey than a destination. Everyone in the audience goes, aww. Now it's time for the book signing. Nick just asks outright for an interview. She says no and adds nothing will change her mind. When it's time to go, Nick finds out a snowstorm has canceled all flights going out of town, and due to a Buffalo Wing convention, all hotels are booked up. He cheerily breaks the news to a departing Natalie and publicist. Natalie is not happy to see him again. There's some banter back and forth. He at least convinces Natalie to take his business card. Both of them plan to drive through the snow at through a nearby mountain pass to a close town that's close by. Whatever, you get what I'm saying. Anyway, the publicist isn't sure Nick is the right choice, but he does think it could do Natalie some good to do an interview like the one Nick is proposing. Natalie does not want to hear it. Instead, she'd rather complain about Nick and his critiques of her books. Her publicist assures her that what he said is not true. Your books give people the belief that everyone can find true love. We cut to Nick driving in the storm. He's updating his editor on the phone. Nothing is guaranteed, but he hasn't given up yet. Over to Natalie and her publicist, also driving in the storm. They almost get into an accident and skid into a nearby snowbank. Now they're stuck. A rescue vehicle appears immediately, and a guy gets out. Natalie? And she sees him and says, Caleb? Turns out it's her high school crush, the guy she based a character on and bumped in Buffalo. He explains that the nearest town is one called Cranberry Falls just over the pass. He'll get them there, and then they can send for the car the next day. Cut to her arriving at the St. Nicholas Inn. The owner is so happy to have Natalie Wolff staying there. She's the second famous author to ever stay there. Charles Dickens stayed there when the place was brand new. Natalie says that's her literature hero. Just then, Caleb walks in with Natalie's bags. He says her car should be fixed by the next day. He's also glad that he ran into her. Maybe they could hang out before she leaves town. Natalie, who is immediately all in on this idea, says she'd love to. They plan to meet for breakfast the next day at the very inn at which Natalie is staying. Later, her publicist is all, so what was that all about? And Natalie denies that there's anything between her and Caleb. He's just an old friend. She then heads to her room and runs into Nick, who she's not happy to see. They banter some more, and Natalie heads to her room. The next morning, Nick tells the owner that he can't remember the last time he slept so well. It's good timing for Nick because he runs into Caleb downstairs. Wait, Caleb? Natalie's high school crush that she mentioned at the book signing? He invites Caleb to sit with him and tells him how they ran into each other, and to tell him how he and Natalie ran into each other after all these years. Caleb tells him the story of what we just saw. He also mentions that he had a bit of a crush on Natalie back in high school. He had no idea that she was so famous, though. He didn't know that she was a big-time author. Nick asks some more questions, like what was Natalie like in high school, and Caleb starts to get suspicious, and Nick says, look, it's just that when you talk about her, you light up. Caleb admits that she was special to him. Oh, but then Caleb gets a call. He has to head out to a car rescue. Nick asks if there's maybe isn't some message that he could pass along for Caleb to Natalie, maybe Caleb's phone number. Cut to Natalie rushing downstairs only to have the inn owner say she just missed Caleb. Oh, and Nick. Nick wanted to let her know that Natalie can find him in the drawing room, and she's going to want to see him. She goes to the drawing room and finds Nick happily waiting for her to arrive, and he mentions that he ran into Caleb, and you just missed him. She sighs when she finds out that he talked to Caleb. She gives him a hard time for not taking a hint that she doesn't want to talk to him. Nick apologizes for for being in her business, but then lures her in by talking about how Caleb said that he had a secret crush on Natalie. She wants to hear more. He says, look, I'm telling you the truth. I'm just trying to build good faith with you. And then he gives her a napkin with a note from Caleb to meet for lunch, and it has his phone number. She happily and regretfully takes the napkin from Nick. Cut to her complaining about Nick to her publicist. She also admits that, well, Caleb kind of broke her heart in high school, and he might not even realize it now. The publicist says that he could be a different person now. She should give this a shot. She calls Caleb's number. Cut to her at a bar waiting for Caleb. It's been a half hour already. She's sad. But in walks Nick, who's there to pick up some lunch. He wishes Natalie a good luck on her date. She says it's not a date, and then Nick leaves. Back at the inn, we get a bit of subplot. Natalie's publicist mentions not having anyone in his life. Well, he runs into Lucas, the photographer from She magazine, who has arrived in town to support Nick. They both immediately are into each other and flirt a bit. Cut to Nick at a cafe learning from a waitress about Caleb. He's a local hero. He even started a toy drive and a thing called the Dickens Festival. Cut to Natalie learning the same from the bartender about Caleb. She's very impressed. She pulls out her list. We can see that she's written sense of humor as her first item on her wish list for a partner. And now she has a second line, kind. Just then, Caleb runs in. He apologizes for being so late and says he got hung up at the fire station. Apparently, he's also a part-time fireman. He was manning a toy drive there. Anyway, she accepts his apology for being so late. We then leave them getting lunch. Back to Nick. He's now asking about Caleb at the firehouse. Everything is cool, but then the guy there mentions how Caleb remained close with an ex of his. For some reason, this causes Nick to raise an eyebrow. Back to lunch with Natalie and Caleb. The two catch up and learn about their lives. She asks if he remembers ever asking her out on a date. He says he does, but then he says he was a different guy back then. We glean this must be part of the heartbreak. So basically, do you remember ever asking me out on a date in high school? And he goes, oh, that's right, I did. But then he just says, I was a different guy back then. Sorry if I ever did anything. Anyway, as they continue to talk, they continue to like each other more and more. Cut to Nick talking to his journalism co-worker Lucas, I don't know why I wrote that instead of photographer, about what he's learned so far. He thinks the story about Natalie could be great. As Nick and Lucas talk, they see Caleb and Natalie walk up after their date. Caleb goes in hard for a kiss, but Natalie's editor calls and interrupts them. While this is happening, Lucas is taking photos, and that's pure creep behavior, Lucas. Don't do that. Caleb heads home, and Natalie updates her editor on the progress of the book. On the way to her room, she runs into Nick, who, again, pleads for some time with her. He makes her a deal. If she gives him 5 minutes and decides she doesn't like him, he'll leave her alone. During this time, when he's making his gambit, he mentions something about how his boss calls him hopeless, and she says, well, why does she call you hopeless? He says, look, let's just say that sometimes happily ever after doesn't end happily ever after. She says she'd like to hear more. Cut to him telling the tale of a heartbreak to her. The gist is he met a lady in college, fell in love, even proposed, but then found out she was having an affair with his best friend. After telling this tale, Natalie is touched by his earnestness and his honesty and his emotion. She asks if he thinks he really could tell her story with such sincerity and emotion the way he told his own. Nick says, I have no doubt I could, but are you brave enough to let me tell it? Natalie thinks. Cut to Natalie writing, trying to figure out the last scene in her book. We've revisited the scene from the beginning of the movie at the train station with the two characters that we saw at the beginning. But she just can't get it right. She even writes out to her character, Holly, are you brave enough? Cut to her telling her publicist that she's decided to stay in town to both finish her book and also to go to the Dickens Festival since he was her literature hero. They go down to breakfast at the inn and run into Lucas, the photographer. He and the publicist flirt some more and decide to go together to get some photos around town. Cut to Nick telling his editor about the good news that he's scored an interview with Natalie. His editor is very happy. Cut to the firehouse. Caleb hears that the Dickens Festival doesn't have enough sponsorship money and might be canceled that year. He says, I can't let that happen. And then Caleb gets an idea. Cut to Nick interviewing Natalie. It's going well. He says one thing he finds fascinating about Natalie is her claim to have never fallen in love. She says, wait, do you think I'm lying? And he goes, absolutely not. I know that lying is one of your least favorite things. Some kind of fatal character flaw. She says, yes, because trust is everything to me. She then gets an idea and adds it to her list of qualities. That'd be like trust. Then she gets a text from Caleb, who invites her down to the firehouse for a tour. She's very excited, but then remembers how much trouble she's having with her writing. Nick says he has a tried and true method that he has used to get past writer's block in the past. And if she's stuck with it and she would like his help, he's happy to help her. Natalie's intrigued. Cut to Nick and Natalie out at a Christmas market. He says his opinion is that when you're dealing with writer's block, it's your brain's way of saying that you need to change your routine. He asks what her story's about. Turns out the characters in her book are also former high school sweethearts. He points out that she doesn't know how they broke up or how they broke up in high school, and that could be the key to figuring out how to get them back together at the end of the book. Natalie thinks this is a great point. They notice a nearby train station and take in a cool train that's there, but this is also reminiscent of the scene in her story. He asks, what would you do in your character's place? She says, I'd have to let go of a lot of hurt. He says, well, where is the hurt? Where is it located? She then segs into talking about her history with Caleb. He asked her to some dance in high school, but then he never showed up, and he ended up taking someone else. The thing is, when he asked her about it afterward, he said he didn't remember asking her. He said he was really sorry, and she believed that he was really sorry. Or at least that he felt bad enough and she let it go. She then plays through a version of events from her book all the way up to the end and strikes on a perfect ending because she figured out where the hurt was coming from. She is so happy she gives Nick a big hug, and then she heads off to the firehouse. So this scene here where he's trying to help her get through some writer's block is my favorite scene in the movie, and it's I think a genuinely cool scene in this movie. Because at one point she's talking about this ending of her book and she's like, and then the one character is all like, I love you except blah, blah, blah. And he's like, wait, what's there? What's the blah, blah, blah? And she goes, I don't know. I'm not sure about it. So he says, well, okay, well, what happened to these characters before? And she says, well, they broke up in high school. And he goes, well, what happened when they broke up? And she goes, well, I don't know. And he goes, well, that's the blah, blah, blah. Whatever you don't know about what happened to them in high school, that's the blah, blah, blah for the end of the book. And it was just a really cool scene to see the way they kind of explained writer's block and explained a process for getting around it and a way to investigate your ideas. I liked that. That's the best part of the movie. Cut to Caleb and Natalie at the firehouse. He's mentioning how the Dickens Festival might not happen. Natalie gets an idea. Maybe she can help. Maybe her publicist can get the snowball rolling for people to know about this place, know about this event, and maybe get some sponsorship money flowing in. Caleb is super appreciative. He even gives her a big hug too. Cut to her publicist planning out how they'll do this. He thinks a personal plea from Natalie over her social media would do the best, but he knows that she doesn't like to do her own social media. She decides to be brave and puts out a live video of herself asking people to support the Dickens Festival. We cut to people watching her video. And then we cut to Natalie finally finishing her story. She sends it immediately off to her editor. Then she gets a message from Caleb. He's right outside of her room. Well, outside of the building in which her room is. When she goes out, he has flowers for her. He thanks her for what she's done. The festival is going to be a huge success now because of her. We cut to Nick finding Lucas taking creep photos from inside of the inn and of Caleb and Natalie. Back to Caleb saying that he meant to give her this the other night. Then he finally kisses Natalie. Nick tells Lucas to not snap that one picture. Give them some privacy. He's also a bit sad to see Natalie kissing Caleb. Cut to Natalie getting glowing feedback from her editor and Nick getting the same sort of feedback from his editor. Everyone is happy. We jump to Nick at the Christmas market where he runs into a woman with a stall. He remembers her name as the girl that as one of Caleb's exes, the ex that Caleb was unusually close with. And he starts asking her questions about Caleb. And she is all ready to talk about Caleb. The woman explains that they're more than close. They still have an on-again, off-again type of relationship. In fact, she's the woman that he cheated on his wife with. Because we found out earlier he was married before. I forgot to mention that. So he was married before. And this is the woman on which he cheated with he cheated he cheated on his wife with her. Nick makes a sad face upon learning that it seems like Caleb might not be so honest about his intentions. Cut to Nick getting ready for the Dickens Festival. He chats with the inn owner about his dilemma. Should he tell Natalie? The inn owner tells him to trust his heart. We get another scene with Lucas and the publicist. Lucas asks him out on a proper date. The publicist accepts. Now over to Natalie, who's meeting up with Caleb. She thinks the festival is amazing. Basically, to describe the Dickens Festival, everyone dresses up in clothing from the appropriate era of Charles Dickens. Big top hats. They put on fake sideburns, things of that nature. So she tells Caleb that the festival is amazing, and then she goes off to find Nick to tell him that she thanks him for pushing her with her story. She's really appreciative of what he's done. He says he's sorry if he pushed too hard, though, because now he knows that by pushing her, he might have pushed her into Caleb's arms. But she's confused. What do you mean by that? Before he can explain, they're both called away. Then Natalie runs into the woman Caleb is seeing, and she tells her it's Natalie's fault that Caleb broke up with her for the 5th time 3 days ago. Caleb sees this happening and tries to cut in, but Natalie has heard enough. 3 days ago? That means Caleb lied to her about being available. She storms off. Cut to Natalie immediately checking out of the inn. Nick, who'd seen all of this go down, hurries into the inn and is sorry for what happened. When she finds out he knew, she gets mad at Nick, too. He explains it perfectly, exactly how he found out and exactly why he wasn't sure about telling her. But she's still mad. She trusted him, she says. Natalie storms off. Nick is sad. Cut to the offices of She magazine, celebrating their big Christmas issue with a cover photo of Natalie Wolf. Nick is still sad. Lucas, the photographer, tries to cheer him up and says he thinks that Nick has feelings for Natalie, and he thinks that he should tell Natalie that he has these feelings. After some encouragement, Nick gets an idea. Cut to the publicist and Lucas having their first date. Natalie delivers some... that's right. So Lucas shows up for a date with the publicist, and he's picking him up from Natalie's place for whatever reason. And when he gets there, he hands Natalie some flowers, and Natalie thinks the flowers are at first for the publicist, but then he goes, no, these are for you. These are from Nick. The card says that she made Nick believe again, presumably in love, but it could be in anything. Could be in Bigfoot. Anyway, Natalie is touched. She decides that she knows what her 5th thing must be, and that is must love Christmas. After finishing her list, she finds out where Nick is and runs off to meet him. There's also a montage where she reviews the items on her list, and we see them being performed by Nick at different points in the movie to prove to her that he is the man for her. Cut to her arriving and surprising Nick wherever he was. After some back and forth about believing in love, they kiss, and it's the goddamn end of the movie. It's a fine movie. I'm just really tired. And I stick by that. I wrote that in my notes, but I also stick by it. It's a fine movie. It's actually one of the better ones that I've watched. Good acting, plot moves forward, they avoid some of the cliches. It's funny at times. I really like that scene about writer's block. So, if you're going to watch one of these movies somehow, for some reason, after I've talked about it, then this is one that I would recommend for you to watch. Must love Christmas. Who's the MVP? I'm going to give the MVP to Nick. I thought he did a good job because his character seems very cliched, like smarmy type of sarcastic guy. But I think he did a good job of balancing that and making him seem like a human being. So that's it for episode 47. Thank you for listening. I will check in with you at episode 48, which, if you're not sure, is just around the corner.